This should be good. Okay. Good morning, everyone. The title today is designing for this session is designing with web annotations. It's going to be kind of a odd mix of things in this session. I categorize it as a case study, but it's going to be couched in this broader topic of what's been going on with web annotations generally. The case study itself is a great project, but I just wanted to focus on the actual web annotations that were implemented on it. So we'll just start off by asking who here is familiar or has read a story on medium.com. Majority. Jason, you don't count because I have a screenshot of his. But for those who haven't used Medium, it's a publishing platform, basically kind of a fancy blogging service, and they describe themselves as having a world-class content editor. And it's a great tool, provides similar functionality to something you might get from WordPress or Drupal for posting stories. But then it also has features like content curation and it's not just a tool for publishing stories, but it's also a service that engages readers, and this is Jason's articles on Medium, and you can see that it brand and so it's a great tool for the publishers, but on this first paragraph, you can barely see on that screen that it's highlighted. That light blue, and those highlights were not done by Jason in this case, by the author. They're contributed by the readers and the commenters. Off to the right there, you can see, again, just barely on this screen, but it says top comment or top highlight, and that indicates that multiple readers have highlighted this as a useful paragraph of interest. And you can, so when you actually click on that text, you see this kind of interface as a user. You can actually post a response that gives some more information about what your thoughts are on that particular paragraph, right? So, yeah, it's a nice tool. It's built into the service itself, and I recommend it. There's a lot of great stories. Check it out. So, I want to give another example of a platform that uses web annotations. Okay, so most of you know about Medium or use it. How about Genius? Who has heard of or used Genius? Nobody. Okay. It was formerly called Rap Genius. That rings any bells? I heard of Rap Genius before I started researching this, but never actually bothered to look at it. So you can go to genius.com and see it. It was founded in 2009 as Rap Genius. Currently, they claim that they have over 2 million contributors. So big audience. This is what the site looks like. And you can see it also has stories. It's a similar kind of publishing platform. But its real purpose was more to capture the lyrics of originally rap songs, right? Hip hop. Since they rebranded, they've been broadening their focus to not just rap, all different kinds of genres, and not just music, but even other kinds of media. So this is an example of, actually, I really like Tribe Called Quest, great band, and this is their latest album, and also a great track on the album, and this line, okay, so it's handle rocks with the capital G, ball on the beat, right? You know, Steve, do you know what that means?
I'm not going
Capital G, right? So the nice thing about this platform is it has built-in annotations, and somebody annotated this line. So the capital G, I'll just read it. In basketball, PG and SG are short for point guard and shooting guard. So they're typically the best ball handlers and playmakers. So to handle the rock like those capital G's is to play with expertise, right? That's the annotation. When I read that, when I heard it, I thought of like, you remember those old like bouncing ball, like going over the words, like a children's song? So there's more context that I never would have gotten out of hearing the actual song.
It's good for parents.
Yeah, it is. The meanings. Yeah, and I was kind of wondering about rocks in that context. I think it has a double connotation. So like I said, Genius is not just for annotating rap songs or just songs. And in fact, one of the investors for Genius is Mark Andreessen, or Andreessen Horowitz is the venture capital firm. And he wrote this really interesting blog post, and it's actually on genius.com, and it's annotated as well. So it still describes them as lyrics. So it has, the labeling's a little off. But he talks about his rationale for investing in this company. And does anybody remember who Mark Andreessen is? Mosaic. Yes, even before Netscape. Mark and what's that?
He did go to found Netscape.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. But along with Eric Bina, they co-founded the Mosaic browser, the original web browser, in almost 25 years ago. And one of the features of the Mosaic browser, I think Netscape had a similar feature, was a built-in annotation component. And the problem with this feature was that they couldn't actually build out the server infrastructure and the hosting to meet any kind of demand to annotate the entire World Wide Web at that point. And they off this feature, and hadn't really been used since, except on a couple of these new services. So last year, some smart folks had an idea about how to use Genius. This is an article from Wired, and you can see that the State of the Union speech was actually annotated because it's not just the website itself, it's actually an API. And you can use it for annotating your own sites or all kinds of information. And you can still go find the State of the Union from last year on the site and see the annotated version. It's no longer on whitehouse.gov, unfortunately. But I did notice that it's still a Drupal site, so give them that. So that's Genius, another example of this trend of annotating sites and pages. So another one that I'm going to talk about, and this is the basis for the case study that we used is hypothesis. Has anyone heard of hypothesis before? Okay. Yeah, severe folks. So, like Genius, hypothesis is a web service that allows you to annotate actually any web page anywhere. And this is their sign-on screen. So you can just go right to the hypothesis. Hypothesis.is. It's really hard to say. Hypothesis.org doesn't work. So yeah, if you Google hypothesis annotations, you'll find it. But hypothesis.is. And log in, create an account, and then you have this option, which is a little different than what we'd seen previously. So they have an add-on for Chrome, and it actually installs a plugin on your web browser. You can use it with other web browsers as well, but it installs a book. You use it as basically a bookmarklet, a JavaScript bookmarklet. There's also another way to use Hypothesis through a proxy server that allows you to share these annotations with other people without, even if they've never heard of or used this plugin. So I know they're also working on a plugin for Firefox and trying to move forward with other browser plugins. So the thing that's new here, well, as you can see, Pat and Oswald being frustrated with a blog post or a story that you can't actually comment on. That's different with Hypothesis now. And I think the best way to illustrate this is to just do a quick demo and show you what this looks like. So I think what I'm going to do is just crane my neck and try to do it like this. So okay, so this is a page on the Hypothesis website, which is a little meta. But over in my sidebar, you can see there are these icons that if I click on, expand, and you can see it's more context of what these annotations are. It highlights each one of these annotations. And I can actually just select an arbitrary string of text or maybe a whole paragraph. Click annotate, and you see it pops up this this form. And I have a few options here. I think this actually uses Markdown syntax. I'll just post a sample annotation, and I have an option here to just, just post this annotation for my own benefit, or I could post it publicly. I'm just going to make it only available to me. But if I click this drop down, you can see there's options here. Okay, so I've just created an annotation that's referencing this page. Okay, so now if I click on that, you can see it in the sidebar. So that's only visible to me. So what that just did is send this text to the Hypothesis server and create that annotation on that, via that Hypothesis API. It reminds me kind of, I think Twitter is a good way to think about how this is working. You're like creating a tweet, except that it's capturing the context of the page that you're creating it on, and then it's able to re-render it when you go visit them. So Yeah, I should also mention, like I add an annotation with the, the a comment associated with it. You could just highlight text as well. Right. It's really easy. And kind of a cool, really simple feature about that is when I created that highlight, it created a URL for that highlight as well on the hypothesis server. And you can actually share that URL to somebody else. So like if you're reading and like a lot of times I'll look for like anchor tags in the article to like reference a particular section of it. With this, you can basically just generate your own anchor tag right within the article or fragment identifier. So and so that first one was a new open layer. That was one of the annotations there. So this is how that actually gets rendered and markup on the page with the hypothesis plugin. Yeah, sure.
So let's say, and this was pretty cool. Let's say you could use this almost like a social media tool as well. Meaning, okay, it's an easy way to, okay, I'm going to read an article and I'm going to. Looks like there's some tools to tweet that out and reference back. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
What happens if you don't have that? If you don't have hypothesis, like, and you click the tweet and you go to that reference?
So if you use that, it's called via proxy server. You can actually render it. You can see it rendered on that server. The context of that article.
So what, like, if let's say I have hypothesis and I'm reading an article and oh, this is cool, I'm going to tweet that out to the masses. Yep. There's a link to it. When that person clicks the link, if they don't have hypothesis, will it go to that spot, or is it the link to the article? You know what I'm saying?
I haven't actually tried that, but if you share that link to that proxy server, they can access it exactly with your intention. So, but this is sort of the default markup that the hypothesis plugin uses. Yeah, but talking about like the social aspects of it and that Patton Oswalt animated gift, I actually stole that from this Engadget commenting policy, which I thought was a pretty good overview of like the state of comments and why comments are actually still kind of valuable, even though I've grown pretty cynical about having comments enabled like on a Drupal site and dealing with spam and trolls and abusive comments and having to moderate that. But the thing I think that is one of the things that's kind of different about these annotations versus comments that are like endnotes on a post is that it shifts the focus of the discussion to the actual page itself, to the words and the actual originating text. So it can provide deeper conversations about the story rather than just these high flame wars in comments. It doesn't eliminate them. I think that's still a real concern. And moderation and tools to support that are something that this hypothesis are working on. So they have one approach called groups, or a feature that allows you to specify a group of users who can post annotations and then share those out. It's a little hard to see, but this is just a sample group that I created. You can have it create as many as you want, and then associate annotations with that group, and basically have kind of a private annotation group. Yeah. I think the tools are in development for dealing with some of these problems, but they're coming along. And the other thing I want to mention about, and this may kind of address some of the questions you had, is that it's an open source. So I should say that Hypothesis is a nonprofit. They're supported by the a bunch of foundations actually, and they provide this API for free. You can also donate to them because they are a nonprofit, but their source code is available on GitHub, and you can download it and create pull requests and try it out. And actually, I haven't tried this, but you could basically host a similar kind of service, and the documentation is all available online. And the app is called H, so they like unusual names. So we used this Hypothesis at Isavera. We used this Hypothesis service on this Science in the Classroom project. So Science in the Classroom is a project of AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and has a grant from the National Science Foundation to provide a collection of research papers from the science magazine journals for free on the web, with annotations built in to support mostly college students, but also high school students, and guide them in learning and analyzing how scientific papers are written. So they've actually been a client at Isavera for almost 5 years, I think. And we sort of inherited this approach they had for annotations that was a CK editor plugin. And we last year got some work from them as basically a grant to switch their annotation system from this built-in CK editor plugin to using Hypothesis. So we did a major redesign of their site and incorporated some other goals. So this is how the site actually looks now, and it's responsive. And it's also in Drupal 8. So we did an upgrade. Yeah, they have some really beautiful photos. And if you click through on some of their stories, you can see the actual paper and the information associated with it. And this right here is an introduction. That's not actually part of the research paper itself. That's added to introduce students to the material. And then up in the sidebar, we also added some tools for educators and students to get more information about understanding the paper. And then just below that in the left sidebar, you can see there's this Learning Lens legend. So when you click or tap on one of these categories on the sidebar, such as previous work here, you can see that it highlights the text in the article. And when you actually click on one of those links, you get a pop-up of the annotation, similar to what we saw with Genius or Medium. One thing that's a little different from those other services, though, and from Hypothesis. Let's see if I can show this. Yeah, okay, so this is live. Is that, yeah, it's not just the one coloration, one category of annotation. We actually have multiple types of annotations embedded next to each other. And they can even overlap. And that was something that Hypothesis hadn't really thought of until we did this integration, and they changed some of their code to handle it. So yeah, a student or an educator can hide these annotations and then click through and you can get that context and further information about that article that's selected, highlight. So, so this is a very specific use case for Hypothesis. What we did was to module called a Learning Lens module. It's a custom module. And there were several aspects to this module. So one thing that so I'll just talk through what this module does. It has an admin interface that allows you to configure specific variables for it. It goes out and fetches those Hypothesis annotations that were made on the site, which are actually made by graduate students and volunteers that work on the site and moderated. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But that Hypothesis plugin, they were generated, and it pulls them into the page itself with JavaScript via the API. And then modifies that highlighted annotation. It also adds that legend block in the sidebar and generates those modal pop-ups. So, like I said, they were a client of ours for several years, and we had these annotations already built with CK Editor. So we also needed to support these older annotations. So for that reason, it's a custom module. We haven't released this on Drupal.org because you don't want that part of it. Yeah.
Well, what's kind of neat about it is, to Steve's point, that means you could have something in Drupal that surfaces Hypothesis annotations to people that don't even know what Hypothesis is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just going to show really quickly like what the module backend looks like. So I mentioned there were these graduate students, volunteers doing the annotations. What we had them do was compile those annotations into a single designated Hypothesis user account, and then they would create those. So the module needs to know what that username is. So that's all it's doing on Hypothesis. So it's not pulling in arbitrary Joe Schmo or whoever. But we also need to specify what the canonical domain name is for that the annotations to be rendered. And this allows us to have this appear not just on the production site, but on development and staging instances of the site. And we also had supported originally a feature with using view modes to show different variations of the paper based on college students or high school students, which we've since gotten rid of. Use annotations across those different URLs. It also allows you to configure, like, basically that on the research paper content type. And originally in the earlier version, we even supported the dynamic creation of these categories that could be mapped to taxonomy terms. We since removed that because it turned out the client they requested this feature and then they never actually used it over the course of like 3 years. So we decided that it wasn't worth having it be dynamic and supporting it. And the only reason I mention it is if we were to revisit this and open source it, I think that would be an excellent feature for a contrib module. This is what that admin screen looks like. So it's pretty standard Drupal, but it lets you see kind of what that looks like. So Sitsi is the name of the user. The production site that canonical domain that's associated with. And then to actually attach those annotations to the research paper page, we use these this standalone anchoring script to us by John Udell at Hypothesis. You can access that and other tools like it for integrating Hypothesis on your site, and you see other examples of that, other integrations. So that's what actually fetches out those annotations and pulls them into the page. We end up with this that standalone anchoring script runs. It looks like basically like this. I shortened it up a little bit, but you have a mark element instead of that custom hypothesis element, and text inside of the mark element that is selected, the highlighted text. And if you kind of drill down into the data attribute on that mark element, you can see that there are these JSON values. So there's the text attribute right there. And so the text of this annotation, the pop-up is the human focused as opposed to considering blah, blah, blah. And also tags. So I didn't mention this before, but Hypothesis supports tagging of annotations. So we use this tagging feature in Hypothesis to categorize the annotations on the site. So what we did was just using jQuery, parse that JSON, and then map that glossary tag to a CSS class, in this case lens-6, and just style it kind of generically as an annotation. And then with this Learning Lens legend block, dynamically with jQuery, just when a checkbox is checked, it just adds this show annotation class to that individual annotation. Right, so you end up with those highlighted, those highlights with that particular color associated with that legend. And then to actually do the modal pop-ups, we use this called Q-tip 2, which is kind of long in the tooth as a modal, but it's still actually pretty good, and it's got legacy browser support like you wouldn't believe. But it did a nice job, and also this is like the bootstrap theme, which looked pretty good. The other thing about this library is it allowed us to, via the API, specify what the title of the pop-up was, so corresponding to the Learning Lens legend. So that's pretty much it. That's what we did to tailor those annotations for that project. And we found this excellent feedback on a educational technology blog post. And I think it really shows, so that they love that the resource is authentic, unchanged, and supported in ways that the students can benefit. So it's the original research paper with this additional layer to help the students to understand it. So that case study aside, I'm going to talk a little bit about some broader implications here about annotations. And this was actually kind of a surprise to me. After having worked on that project, a Hypothesis working with the W3C do an actual specification. And you can go to the site, read the recommendations, the spec. I think the really interesting thing about where this is going is the web browser makers will Firefox, Safari, incorporate this web annotation framework into the browser itself, and being a separate plugin that you add. The actual specification is there are 3 parts. I don't want to get into the details too much, but I think the data model is nice to reflect on. Vocabulary and protocol. The data model is basically treating an annotation as what they call a body, which is the text of like the comment, in where that actually exists, where you're actually referencing. So the body is about that target, right? So that's the kind of thing that the specification describes in very close detail. So this is a quote from the founder and CEO of Hypothesis that I've been reflecting on and trying to understand where this is going and what this means more generally. And it took me some time to kind of digest this. But so what he says here is that the World Wide Web Consortium architecture provides for a model where annotations live separately from documents and re-anchored in real time whenever the relevant document is present. The benefit of this is that annotations now come under the control and election of the user, rather than at the sole discretion of the publisher. So the thing that this reminded me of is the paradigm shift that happened, actually, thanks to the keynote speaker later, really digging into responsive web design, was about users having different kinds of devices than content publishers and designers were, ready to create for. There is this inherent tension of control between a publisher and the site visitor, the user, the consumer of that site. So I remember, pages that said this site best viewed on Internet Explorer 6 at 800 by 600 and so on, right? I remember those days. But now it's taken for granted that you need to build your site to support a wide range of user preferences, devices, and I think if this specification really takes off with browser makers, and also I should mention screen reader makers, that it could shift the change of like how we think about commenting on the web, being something that's embedded within a site, within a publishing platform, to something that is almost independent of it and takes on its own life. So that's it. I have any questions? Yeah.
What kind of moderation tools does Hypothesis provide?
So right now, they don't really. Is the group feature is the big one. I think the moderation feature is really that it's optional to view the annotations or not, and selectively choose when you're viewing. But that's something that they're working on, and it's a high priority for them. You can actually go on to, they have their roadmap is in Trello, and it's publicly available, and see how that's moving along in their future.
So like at this moment in time, probably not a good replacement for like your standard comment section because there's no moderation. So if you open up public,
well,
there's no way to sort of limit or like delete comments.
Right. You sort of, the funny thing about this is you sort of don't really have a choice about it. anybody can go to your site right now and annotate it with hypothesis, and they're creating those comments, those annotations on the hypothesis server, referencing that URL. So it could already be happening.
Doesn't it quickly become very cluttered though? I mean, wasn't that the original problem with the original you're talking about? It just became too much. Is that a concern?
It definitely is a concern. I don't work at Hypothesis,
No, yes.
so I don't know like how they scale out those kinds of like a really densely annotated paper, and how you deal with like version control of that and like nested. I mean, the comments do have replies built into them, so it's not necessarily like annotation upon annotation, but like one annotation with a kind of a thread of comments. And also, you know, that question of like how that's threaded or how it's moderated, that would exist outside of the spec, the W3 spec. So that depends on the implementation. The other thing is that Hypothesis is just one service, and this is open source. There could be thousands of annotation services running. You could run your own. So
there's a difference though between the City project where we integrated the technology where they do have control of what that is, and the service itself, which is tied really to the critical mass that it's tied to. Like it's yours. Like that's your own individual comment tied to, like you were saying, there could be a real popular article that crowdsource wise has a ton of comments within Hypothesis. You could find some obscure article somewhere that you comment on something and nothing's there.
Right.
And who's tied to Hypothesis and who's tied to the content. And there's probably filtering devices within different tools to make, like you could probably say, don't show me anything profane or something.
As far as I know, it's early days.
Yeah, it becomes it's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what the Science in the Classroom project demonstrates, is that you can selectively incorporate an account or a group onto your project if you want to do that, and then invite people to that project. Sure.
Would it be feasible to use this for unpublished content? Like for stuff that's being got like content that different content editors are collaborating on?
So like just that exists on a local server.
No, I mean like for like live website type of content.
Yes, because that you're just referencing that URL,
The URL.
and then based or it could be tied to a canonical, like with that canonical relationship. But if the other people who have access to that document can, you know, see that relationship on the document when it's displayed, there's no reason it wouldn't do that.
Well, yeah, the hypothesis isn't verifying access; it's just storing URL.
It's just storing the data, right?
I think there
That's
is.
an interesting.
And
that's
then
a
is
really cool
there
application.
a place where there's no place where like all of the applications would display that in public? Like would there be security concerns?
Well, that's yes. That's the, like as far the way that the hypothesis API works is it's public. Think of it like Twitter. When you create an annotation, and it starts to get really weird when you play around, because like I was in Gmail and I'm like, I can annotate my email messages, and this goes to the hypothesis server if I do that.
So you have
The URL is really bizarre in that case, because it's if you're just like on the Gmail homepage, like that's a shared URL for millions of people. So you would see other people's annotations.
But where does that data go? Like,
If you're using just
where-
Hypothesis, it's on the Hypothesis server.
Okay, but it's not like they're publishing.
No, they are.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, it's published. Again, think of it like a Twitter. It's a feed of annotations. It's not, except for when you set it to private for your own account. I may be wrong. Maybe it's different with groups. I don't know the detail about like privacy associated with groups. That may be something that they're working on, that you could associate it with a group and make that, like you only access that if you're part of the group. Actually, don't know about that. In retrospect, we really wanted to incorporate that groups feature into the Science in the Classroom project, specifically so that they could add graduate students to the group rather than have to manually kind of curate that. But we just didn't have the feature at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like if you were going to use that as like a Google Docs thing, if you then publish the page, like those annotations would still be public, like tied to the text, right? Like that's what you're saying. If someone visits the site of Hypothesis, they would see those annotations that you made during the editing.
Right.
But it's available on GitHub, right? So in theory, could you hack it and create like a private version of it? So you post it on your own server, put it behind like a login gate, and then you could have it only available for content.
As far as I know, I haven't tested that, but the people at Hypothesis are very open to collaboration. Great, and like these are web people. Like I'm sure they've had this discussion, and it's like available online if you just go look for it. They're also on IRC and Slack and Google groups. So like there's lots of discussions about that.
And I have one other question.
Mhm.
Do you see any examples of this being used for monitoring the site? Information about how it might work.
I hadn't really thought of that angle. I've been more concerned about the accessibility angle, but off the top of my head, I don't think there's any reason that it would be an issue.
Well, except it would be tied to that language version of the content.
The
Yeah, you
UI.
just have like totally separate annotations.
Oh,
Yeah, because you couldn't even tie it to like a character placement or anything like that.
yeah.
In the same place.
I don't know. That's a really interesting question. And I would assume you would want to be able to filter on a very popular, maybe Wikipedia page, if it's being annotated by a dozen different languages, to filter by the specific language that you're
Like
looking.
the annotation.
Yeah. Maybe that's on the roadmap. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of yeah. It really depends on how much traction I think the spec gets with browser makers and how much this grows. But I do want to say that like in the meantime, it has surprisingly useful kind of little practical implications that, like I said, if you want to just share kind of a one-off reference to somebody or annotate a page, be public, but you can just go. It's really easy to do, and you're not bound by like whatever Google commenting platform or whatever. And they're also targeting like ebooks as a platform for this too as well. I should mention not just websites.
But we talked about that before, where
Yeah.
it's somewhat of a technology searching for a problem. The problems is like, because you just brought up 2 use cases. It is sure, like kind of consider specifically. Even I'm curious as to the one you were talking about with kind of this. I think what you're talking about is if you have a collaborative document that you want to eventually publish, but you want input from a bunch of.
Both. I was thinking of 2 use cases. One where it's private content, those going to be private, and there's going to be people giving feedback on the application form. Like maybe you're applying to grad school and you fill in some form, and people are like, oh no, you need to add this form, whatever, like something private, and then another work
I think what's interesting about this is that because they're pushing this towards an open standard, and I would assume that they're starting to align their own syntax with where that standard is going. That's actually the whole point of it, is to allow it to be anywhere.
Right.
And it's really more about the technology to enable it and display it. So I think the idea of a private annotation service that you can be running in your own network, would make an awful lot of sense. And then because you want to have that control over the privacy of content, and something like let's say it's a document that everybody internally is commenting on, but it's going to be published on the public site. You don't want all the private notes to then be made public. So there's a lot of different things there, but I think as soon as you start to see the places where, like with Rap Genius and Medium, highlighting in a Kindle, if people are fans of reading online and go way back to one of the earlier platforms, ReadMill was one of the best e-reading platforms that did what Medium was doing first, where you could highlight a passage in a book and then everyone else that you're connected with could see the things that you highlight. Ebook platforms are only just starting to do it. This is all annotation. Like, it is one of those things where you need to know how much we can do to change the whole paradigm of shared experience in reading. It's just massively better than comments.
I mean, just think of like the birth of the web. The web was originally like open, public, it's no big deal right now to set up an intranet, a private intranet. Is serving web pages to a select group of users. It can be very tailored. The same thing's true for this spec and service. It's just new, like early days.
Can you annotate images? Does it just highlight?
I think so. Yes. Although I don't know what it looks like. Yeah, I mean, because you're just wrapping it with it.
Just maybe think about just in terms of even just in our work, like showing client a version of something, have them be able to comment right on that on the web.
Well, that's we often we'll share PDFs with clients, and and they'll be. Everybody tries to find some way to add comments, whether it's content or why not a wireframe, or if it's
surely all the other annotations are off.
No, we have not had that happen. So, yeah.
What if you change the actual highlighting text itself? So, like, you had text, you had an annotation on the phrase like market dynamics or whatever, and then you changed it to market flexibility. Would you lose that annotation?
I don't know actually, because like as a developer working on this project, it's like a content authoring problem, and I recommend you give it a try and see what happens. And it's free. So.
Well, I think what you're saying, that, and what you guys are saying, is that it is sort of the very beginning. Like, you just really see this start to pop up. And I kind of came to this talk, and I didn't actually know what web annotations were. And then all of a sudden, you sort of got into it. I was like, I see these all over the place. Like I love NPR's live fact checking. That's all annotations. Like, it's just an incredible proliferation of technology.
That's a good example.
I think one of the things that's really important to point out with these things is that it's a web standard. W3C has moved all discussion about evolving web standards to GitHub. We all know how to participate in that. It's totally open. And so like this is the opportunity. I mean, I'm going to be talking later today about another aspect of the W3C spec that's evolving for variable fonts. And this is a discussion that anyone gets to participate in. And all you need to do is you just need a GitHub username. Most of us have that. And you can go and you can add comments, you can influence the discussion, and you can bring up these questions and say, well, what about this use case? What about that use case? The whole reason we have responsive images is because a group formed, many people participated, and we hammered out something that actually works for the whole web. And that's why they've shifted it away from listservs that people have to go subscribe to this more of an effectively threaded discussion. So we can talk about these things, and we can participate in it and shape the direction of it just as we do with people.
You mentioned GitHub as an example, but probably the next generation of that discussion will happen with annotations themselves. Yeah. So maybe we'll wrap it at that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.